everyone, and welcome to today's episode. I know I start a lot of episodes saying this is going to be really fun today, but I really mean it. This is going to be so much fun, especially for me, because I get the opportunity today to interview a couple of people that I have been following for, I don't know, 15 to 20 years. I first read Josh's book, The Bucolic Plague, when it came out. It was all about their move to the country and how they got started with goats. So I am joined today by Josh Kilmer-Purcell and Brent Ridge, and they are going to be talking about their whole journey. But they just came out with a brand new book called Goat Wisdom: How to Build a Truly Great Business. And I know I've interviewed a lot of people on here before who have had goat milk businesses for cheese or soap or whatever. I remember it was soap maker Deb making the goat milk soap in her kitchen, and they were wrapping it themselves by hand back in the beginning. And I totally resonated with that because that's exactly what we were doing on our farm. So anyway, welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having
So,
us.
so great to get to chat with you. We've waited to be on your podcast forever, so we're excited. And yes, goats did save our lives, just like a lot of your listeners. We know that you think goats saved your lives too. And yes, anything that we could have ever made with goat milk, in the beginning we tried goat milk soap, goat milk cheese, goat milk fudge, goat milk cajeta, goat milk ice cream. We've done it all. Finally settled on skincare as our path.
Yeah, I remember that. Oh my gosh, people loved your cheese. And they were so disappointed when you stopped making the cheese.
Yeah.
So before we go any farther, I gotta know that like not everybody on here has been following you forever like I have. And I resonated with your story so much because I always tell people that we were just a bunch of clueless city slickers when we moved to the country. I thought people have been growing their own food since the beginning of time. How hard can it be? And as it turns out, it was actually a lot harder than I expected. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about how a couple of New Yorkers wound up out in the country in upstate New York?
Yes, so we were, as you said, two New York City guys. Brent was a physician. He also worked for Martha Stewart for her health and wellness division. I worked in advertising. I'd written a couple of books. And we were traveling in upstate New York one weekend in 2006. And we came across this little town called Sharon Springs, which we fell in love with. And on our way out of town, we saw a farm that was gorgeous, beautiful, and it happened to be for sale. So we bought that farm. Originally, it was just going to be a weekend place. Both Brent and I grew up in the country. So we thought, well, this will be a return to our roots a little bit. And then we got a letter in our mailbox from a neighbor. Farmer John was his name. And he was losing his farm. He had 80 goats and nowhere to bring them. And he asked if he could bring them to our empty barn. So we said, sure, and you come to John, there was another little house on the property you could have. And so everything was great for about 2 years. Then we lost our jobs in the Great Recession, 2008. And we had to start all over again. We had no money to pay for the farm, no money to pay our mortgage. And we literally Googled, what can we make with goat milk? And that's how it started. Goat milk soap was the first thing that came up. Or actually, this is the little known truth that we rarely tell. Cheese was the first thing to come up. But then we researched how much work you have to go to get licensed to produce cheese. And so we said, well, soap might be easier. So we started with that.
Yeah, that is exactly what happened to me. I was giving cheese to people and they were like, "Oh my gosh, this is so good. Can I buy it from you?" And so I started charging people for my cheese. I'm sure the statute of limitations has expired, so I can tell the story. I started selling cheese to people. And then one day somebody called me and said, "Hey, my mom's doctor wants to buy some of your cheese." And I just about fainted because I'm like, I am sure this man is not expecting a block of cheese in a little Ziploc bag with no label. And
Which are the best kind of cheeses, to be honest, to be fair.
yeah, and I remember that night at dinner, I was really quiet, and my kids are like, "Mom, why are you so quiet?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm just wondering if like I could wind up in prison or just find like a really huge amount of money for
Yeah.
selling goat cheese without a license." And yeah, it was crazy expensive. So whenever people ask me what they should start with, I always say goat milk soap because the startup costs are way less. So instead of learning to make goat milk soap yourself, you guys found a soap maker and started working with her. So how did that work?
Yeah, right after we Googled and saw goat milk soap, then the next thing I Googled was soap makers in upstate New York. Because yes, you can find out how to make goat milk soap in many places online, lots and lots of YouTube videos for it. But we were just starting out and we needed someone who already had equipment And, because we were kind of in desperate straits, like we had this $1 million mortgage on the farm. We're like, we have to do something. And so we need to get started fast. And so Josh got hastily learned how to code and coded our first website himself, started working with Deb, making the bars of soap. She was making the bars of soap in her barn at the time. And that's how the company started. And, and I think that's one of the things that has been so important to the growth of our company is we've always appreciated the importance of neighbors. And, when we started out in Sharon Springs, of course, it was Farmer John, the original neighbor and the original act of kindness. But it's always been with the help of our neighbors. And when we first started the company, it was like, okay, can we save our farm? And then the next step was, can we save our little village, which, small upstate New York villages are in dire straits. As we grow the company, we just keep thinking, how many more people can benefit from what we're doing? And we always say our company grew neighbor by neighbor by neighbor. And really from the very beginning with Farmer John and Deb.
And I think since so many of your listeners, have a small business focused around goats or they want to start one around goats, I think one of the things that we learned really early on was to realize what you bring to the table or what we brought to the table. I remember in the beginning, we would go out and be like, hey, John, we're going to help you learn how to milk today. We're going to help you out. And that lasted like a day and a half. And then John was like, I got this, because it was taking him 3 times as long, with, 3 times as much help. And yes, we could have invested in all the soap making equipment, but Deb was renowned, in the area for making amazing soap. What did we bring to the table? We brought our media background, marketing background from advertising. So I traded Deb McGillicuddy a logo for her company. I created a logo in marketing for her business, in trade for her making our soap. And so it was really, what can you bring to the table? Don't think just because you have goats and you want to start a farm-based business that you have to do everything yourself. In fact, that probably is the worst thing to do.
That is a really good point. Yeah, because it is challenging. And a couple months ago, I interviewed a retired physician who started a cheese making business, and she buys her milk from local farmers.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
you can't. It's really hard to do it all.
You can't do everything yourself. It's fun to know how to do everything yourself, but it's not efficient to do it all yourself.
exactly. I think even with my online business, I learned how to do everything myself and I did it myself eventually. And then I started hiring things out,
Mm-hmm.
like this podcast, I edited the first 19 episodes myself and then realized, okay, I can do it, but this is not my zone of genius. I don't love this. And so I hired an editor.
That's right. And by first knowing how to do it yourself, you knew how to judge whether someone was a good editor. And so that's actually one of the GOAT wisdom lessons that we put in the book, is that a new entrepreneur should always learn how to do every task in the job first before they delegate it out.
I love that. That is awesome. So I know you've written a lot of books and I have a lot of them. Like, I think every goat owner would just love to read Josh's first book, The Bucolic Plague. We'll have a link to that in the show notes. I've also got one of your cookbooks because you guys have just really done it all. So what inspired you to write a business book?
Well, we've been in business now for 16 years and have really grown from those days wrapping the bars of soap around our dining room table to a global skincare brand. And our agent said, you know what, I think it's probably time for you guys to write a book on entrepreneurship that really talks about how you grew this business. Because so much in popular media these days, the only representation you get of success are like tech billionaires or social media influencer guru executive coaches, and we're like, there's just a world of small to mid-sized businesses on Main Street millionaires. And let's not only highlight those types of people, but also say, you know what, you can do this. You can grow a big business right on your Main Street in your own community if you have the right tools and the right thought process and mindset for setting a good foundation for your business. And so that really was the idea from the book. How could our story be inspirational and married to really good practical advice for laying the foundations of a good business, and put those two things together? And the really...
And I was gonna say, and those tools aren't necessarily, like big secrets or like super tech savvy, futuristic things you need to learn. The tools are things that we've all known forever. Our grandparents knew them. They're, age-old wisdoms that we maybe have forgot about. But what we tried to do in this book was not just remind you, but say, this is how they apply to today's contemporary business world. Everything from an empty vessel makes the most noise, to you can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink, to make hay while the sun shines. These are tried and true things that we just rattle off and take them for granted, but they are really actually wise sayings and wise guideposts for all of us to follow, even with a contemporary business.
And they're tried and true. So many business books these days are, 5 hacks to do XYZ, or, 5 easy steps to be a millionaire. And none of them are necessarily true. They are like, kind of instant gratification, or they sell you on the idea of instant gratification. But what we're saying is, what? These tried and truisms that we're talking about, these are things that started out with the original entrepreneurs. So many of them are agrarian based, right? They were based in farm life. And the reason they have been around for so many hundreds of years, even though most people aren't farmers anymore, is that there's true wisdom to them. They have been verified, they've been replicated. These things matter. And that's what we wanted to encourage people to do. And when we sought out to write the book, we told our agent, yes, there are many people we could publish with because we've, done so many books in the past. But for this particular book, because the message we're trying to communicate, we really want someone with the stamp of approval of Harvard Business Review to write this book with us and do this book with us. Because part of what we're saying in this book is you don't need an MBA to grow a successful business. You may not even need a college degree to grow a successful business. A lot of what you need to know are things that are inherent that maybe your grandma taught you, like those life lessons that your grandma taught you. Those are the things that create the foundation for a great business. And so we just want to inspire everybody out there who has that dream not to discourage themselves because they don't think they're qualified. You can do it. You have the wisdom to do it.
Absolutely. I love that. And I know one of the things that the book talks about is focusing on the customer. When I used to go to craft fairs with my soap, and I'd be like, I was just going on and on about, the goats and the goat milk and the all essential oils and everything, just blathering on and on about the soap. And I probably would have sold a lot more if I had been focused on the customer and their needs. So what kind of lessons can you share with our listeners about that?
That is very true. One of the things that we always say, it's not what you want to say, it's what your customer wants to hear. And one of my favorite examples is actually back when I was in advertising and I worked for a food company. I won't say which one, but they made macaroni and cheese. And they were very proud because they finally got their cheese to a certain percentage point where they could say they were 100% real cheese. And they wanted that all over the packaging. They wanted new commercials to say, now 100% real cheese. And they were legitimately proud. They worked very hard to get the cost to a point where they could do that. But we pointed out to them, the minute you say we are now 100% real cheese, everyone is going to be thinking that for the last 40 years that you are lying to them with your macaroni and cheese. So we always start with what's the customer want to hear? What is not what we want to say about something. We could be very excited about a new product, but to your point, if it doesn't matter to the customer, they have no need for it.
And I do think that is important. You do have to be able to read the customer. Like say you were at a farmer's market. Some customers that stop at your booth are just going to be enthralled by the idea of goats, or that you can make, some people don't even know you can make soap from goat milk. So they're going to be enthralled by that story and the romance and your personal story as the founder and why you decided to start this company. And that's going to be the reason they feel compelled to buy the product. And then some people are going to stop because they have a skin issue, they have eczema, or they have psoriasis, and they're going to stop because maybe they've heard that goat milk is great for sensitive skins. And what you have to do is make sure that you are listening to what the customer needs, what they're telling you they're needing, why they're stopping, and lean into that aspect of your story. You can't just go on autopilot and tell the same story to every customer.
Another important thing to our story with our customers is we've always called our customers neighbors. We don't even remember when it started, but from the very beginning, we were calling our customers neighbors. The reason that word has always worked so well for us is that internally with our team, with Team Beekman, the word customer is just transactional. It's make a sale, get your money, move on. The word neighbor is an ongoing relationship, and you have to treat your neighbors better than you do a stranger on the street. Maybe you shouldn't, but it's wise to treat your neighbors better than just anybody. And so our internal team has a closer relationship with our customers. And then our customers at the same time, they don't feel like customers, they truly feel like neighbors in a neighborhood. So as we scaled, and this is really difficult for small home-based, farm-based businesses to scale without people feeling like you're selling out or compromising. And we've been able to scale from our dining room table to one of the top beauty brands in the country. And I think the reason we had the goodwill from our neighbors to do that was because they felt like they were part of the success because they were in the neighborhood. So our whole neighborhood made it from our dining room table to Ulta, not just us as a company. I mean, our neighbors are so proud every step of the way, every time we grew. And they should be. They're the reason we did grow.
Yeah, I remember that. I was one of the followers of your blog back in the day, and I even wrote a couple blog articles for you. It was so much fun, and you guys were always there. When I know somebody that has a business and they complain about like people asking questions on their blogs or on their YouTube channel, and I'm like, why are you complaining? Like, you want people to be engaged. And that was one of the things I remember about you guys from the very beginning. You were so engaged with everybody on every channel, whether it was your blog, your Facebook page, or whatever. You were always answering people's questions and taking them seriously.
Still
Honest
do.
answers. Yeah.
Yeah, we still do. We still manage, of course, our brand has their own social media pages, but we have our own personal pages. And when people are there, we're interacting with them and answering their questions because we really do love it. Like, we love communicating with the neighbors. We're so excited. This is our first book in, wow, probably 5 years or so. So we're so excited to be going out, on a book tour again, where you can like go to little bookshops and like meet with the neighbors. Like, we just love that. And even to this day, I still start every morning going through neighbor services. That's what we call customer service at Beekman. I read through neighbor service emails to see what people are saying, what questions they have, what are we doing that's not meeting their needs. I still do that. And I think it's so important as a founder to do that.
Yeah. I found out about your book because we're on LinkedIn together, and I saw you saying you're coming out with a new book, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome.
And that's how we got to your podcast finally.
Yes, exactly. It's so cool what you've done for the little village of Sharon Springs, too. Like, that's something I wish I could do for my little village of Cornell. It's like 450 people and mostly dead. There's a grain elevator and a Casey's gas station, and that's about it.
Mhm.
And you guys have just really done such amazing things for Sharon Springs. I remember seeing some of your early stuff where you were having your festivals and everything. I was like, oh my gosh, how does a little village like that handle this influx of thousands of people? Can you talk a little bit about how the village of Sharon Springs has evolved around you guys?
Yeah, and we tell this story about the beginnings of the Harvest Festival. When we first got there, we were two city guys, and we saw all of this wealth of agriculture around. And I'm like, well, city people love, this type of experience. And so we said we should have a harvest festival.
We went to the village board and we proposed, can the village throw a harvest festival? And they were like, oh, I don't know. We tried that. It didn't work so well. And I was like, oh, well, what went wrong? And they said, well, JFK was shot and it was really a downer time. And I'm like, but that was like 30 years ago that you tried it. But that's, we all know that's how small communities are. If they get stuck in their ways, and if you try something new and it doesn't work, then you don't try anything new again. So we went out and did it ourselves with some friends of ours. And it really, first year we had about 500 people. Word got out. Then we had our television show in the interim, and word really got out, and we got 5,000 people the next year. That first year where we had thousands, we ran out of food because there's only 1.5 restaurants in Sharon Springs. The half one is the gas station. And we ran out of food on Saturday morning of the Harvest Festival weekend. And by the afternoon, we started seeing people walking around with hot dogs and hamburgers. And I asked one of them, I said, where did that come from? And they said, well, somebody up on the hill is handing them out. And it turned out one of our neighbors had driven the 30 miles to the nearest grocery store, bought all the hot dogs, hamburgers, coleslaw, potato chips, everything out of the grocery store, came back, set up a grill, and gave it all away. And when we went back to try to repay him afterwards, he said, you guys worked so hard last year to bring people in. I wanted to make sure they don't go home hungry. And that's how a community grows. It's just by that sort of mutual, constant sacrifice, especially a small community that's struggling. People really, really have to give of themselves. And if you believe in your community, you have to set your ego aside. You have to set aside your sort of selfish desire for profit or growth and just pull everything together and try to help each other.
And
that's a long answer, but it's very difficult. Yeah, lead by example.
Lead by example. Like Josh said, that first year, we did ourselves. Josh dressed up as William Beekman, who was the builder of our farm back in 1802, dressed up in like leotards and stood on the highway on Route 20, ringing a bell like waving people down into the Harvest Festival. And by the time we finished the Harvest Festival, we did 10 years of the Harvest Festival and the pandemic shut it down. We grew to a weekend that brought in 20,000 people into Little Sharon Springs, New York. And it always remained a community-driven project, like community volunteers working to run that festival. Because some of the businesses on our little main street, which is maybe half a mile long, they made more money during that weekend than they did the rest of the year. And so there was motivation to participate and work hard and make it happen. And
yeah, we never spent a single penny on marketing. The key was everyone in town knew that everybody that went home had to go home wanting to come back and wanting to bring somebody else. So that's how we grew from 500 to 10,000 people that final year. Everybody came back and everybody brought somebody else.
Wow, that is amazing. Yeah, I love how you told a story in the beginning about how you started, with just the customers, which you refer to as your neighbors, and then the community of Sharon Springs, and then the larger world. How do you think that can apply to other people in other areas?
well, I think you always have to think about who are going to be your biggest advocates first, right? We always say this when you're starting a company, you're the entrepreneur, the founder, you are the original salesperson. And then when you grow a little bit, then maybe you hire someone who's good at sales and they're your salesperson. And that's fine. You could stop there and have a very good business, right? You've got your salesperson, you're doing whatever, you have a very good business. If you want to scale a business, then your customers have to become your salespeople because that's the only way you can reach mass awareness. And these days, we live in an attention economy. And so you need every single one of your customers, no matter if their audience is the members in their household, whether they have a social media following and have 100 followers, or they have 1,000 followers or 10,000 followers. You need everybody to feel like they are part of the story and they want to talk about your product. So your customers have to become your salespeople if you are going to scale your business.
And I would go back to what we were talking about earlier about knowing what your customers want and be prepared to pivot to satisfy that need, because you may go into your business thinking you're one thing, which is what we did. We thought, we came from a city background. We knew all of our friends. We thought all of our friends would want to buy very expensive handmade blankets, very expensive handmade things. And so we thought it was the city person looking for artisanal goods. But it really turned out our message resonated with other people in small towns and other craftspeople. And so we really built our customer base based on a demographic of small town in Midwest and not sort of cool, hip coastal people. Although that's where we originally thought our audience was going to be. We just listened to them and said, oh, here's who our message is resonating with. Here's who we're going to market to.
In the same way with the skincare business, as Josh said, we started out in doing very different verticals. We had always had skincare and, the body care. That was the original, but we had a whole vertical of gardening and gardening products. We had a whole vertical of food products. Of course, we had all of our media products, and then we had home decor as well. But it really was the skincare that people were really interested in, particularly when when we went on TV retail and people just really said, no, this is making a difference in my skin. And so then I just put my doctor's hat back on and we started really researching the goat milk, and have done over 324 clinical studies on goat milk and skin now and skin microbiome. And we just really listened to what our customer was saying and they needed. And we're like, okay, we're going to figure out why goat milk is so good for the skin. And that's why I was saying, before we started the podcast, we are so proud of all of the people who are out there making goat milk soap, selling it in their communities, selling it at farmers markets and crafts fairs and things like that. Because the more people that learn about goat milk and they use that first bar of soap, wherever they happen to buy it, they're going to see the difference it makes in their skin. And then they're going to want to learn more. And what we're trying to do at Beekman is have all of the science to show, hey, this is why it's important. And Josh and I often say, we have been blessed to travel all around the world. And anytime we're somewhere, we always go to farmers market. We'd rather go to a farmers market than a museum. And invariably, no matter if you're in Africa, if you're in India, if you're in China, you go to a farmers market, you will find someone selling goat milk soap. And there is not another single skincare utilized ingredient in the world where there's somebody in a culture using that, which is an amazing thing if you think about it.
And we still say today, even on QVC and HSN, when people call in, we say, if you know somebody making goat milk soap in your area, buy it from them. Don't buy it from us.
Yeah.
That's how we all grow together.
Oh, I love that so much. And you're so right. Like when I moved to the country, I was complaining to somebody about the fact that I could not use any soap other than this one unscented soap I got at the health food store, which was driving me crazy because I used to be a fragrance junkie. And she said, well, you have goats. Why don't you make goat milk soap? I didn't even know what she was talking about, but I did. I did the research and I started making it. And not only did I discover that, like, oh my gosh, I can play around with all these essential oils and have some fragrance back in my life, but my son, who had like cracked and bleeding elbows and hands, it all went away. Like
Mm-hmm.
it completely took care of his skin problems. I said, even if I don't sell it anymore, I will always be using goat milk soap. Even if I'm not making it, I'll
Mm-hmm.
be buying it from somebody else.
Well, that's wonderful. And now, and before people just didn't know why it was working, but now with all the research that we've done, we understand the science behind what are the components in the goat milk that make it so beneficial to the skin.
This is actually a great thing since we know so many of your listeners do make their own soap and try to sell their own soap. Here is what we know works with the customer. Goat milk has the same pH as human skin, so it doesn't strip your skin. That is probably the number one message that works.
And that's the important thing for barrier health. And, we've been talking about the barrier health for so long, but that really is, if you're selling your soap in a market, talk to the customer about barrier health because the way they cleanse their skin is the most important step of skin health in their skincare routine because you don't want to disrupt the barrier.
I'll just give them 3 things to remember when they're selling the same pH as your skin. Goat milk has a very, very similar protein structure to human milk, so your skin doesn't repel it like it does other things. That's why it absorbs. And then third, that we were the first ones to actually do the science on this. Goat milk has 31 key nutrients that benefit your skin. And you can find those on our website. So if you are somebody who is selling soap in a market or wherever you're trying to sell on your website, those are the 3 things that we found customers want to know most why goat milk works for skin.
That is great to know. So we will also be sure that we put a link to that in our show notes as well. And I think you may have just gotten yourself automatically invited back to do another episode
Oh, good.
to talk
Sure.
about those 30 something studies that you've done.
324 clinical studies.
Oh my gosh, see, my brain could not even comprehend that number. I'm like, it was a 3 something.
Yeah.
Wow, that is awesome. So you have to come back now and talk
Sure.
about that because I love talking about research.
Me too. And then Josh is always good about translating the nerd in me. So
Yeah.
I will
speak
rattle
nerd.
on and then Josh will say, but what he means is this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds terrific. So everybody can look forward to that. So I want to pull it back to the book that just came out now. Like I know you've got a lot of goat wisdom in there, which I love.
Mhm.
What is the biggest takeaway you think for people?
Okay, well, there's a takeaway. But before I answer that, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What is that bit of wisdom, that parable or that maxim? Maybe you heard from your mom or your grandmom, or you read it somewhere. What is that one thing that you come back to most often in your life?
My mother used to always say, tomorrow never comes, so don't procrastinate.
Okay, and do you come back to that often?
Yeah, yeah. It's like, all right, I got to do this now.
That's your goat wisdom. And that's what we want people to really understand. First, we want people to understand what is that guiding principle for their life? What is that piece of wisdom that they have been given? And always learn how you can apply it to so many aspects of your life. The second thing we wanted people to do in the book is that by the time they finish the book, in addition to our inspirational story and lots of business psychology that we partner with Harvard Business Review on, there are exercises at the end of each chapter that help you convert information into wisdom. And, we live in a day and age where we are bombarded with information, so much information that our brain cannot even comprehend the vast majority of it. And so what we want people to have, we hope people have built by the time they finish the book is to, one, recognize when they see something as a piece of information that is important to something that's happening in their life, how can they recognize it and how can they immediately convert it into wisdom so that it can become applicable to helping them solve their life problems? And that's how you will have a success in life and you will have a success in business, converting information into wisdom. And I think so much these days, we're so distracted by so many different things that we don't. So that's what we hope people will accomplish.
Awesome. So I know your book is available everywhere that books are sold. It is all over the place. Where can people find you online?
They can find us. Our website is beekman1802.com. And if they want to follow us personally, our Instagram is at Josh and Brent, and our Facebook is at Beekman1802 Boys. Yeah, we'd love to hang out with them.
Awesome. And we will put those links in the show notes too for anybody who's driving or gardening or milking goats or whatever.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I look forward to having you come back and nerd out on the science of goat milk sometime.
Absolutely. Always happy to do that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.